Welcome back to The Explainer. I am so excited to guide you through today's topic because, honestly, we're unpacking one of the most talked about frameworks of the entire last decade. We're diving right into the core concepts of James Clear's 2018 smash hit Atomic Habits. Now, think of this explainer not as some fluffy motivational speech, but more like a systems-based cheat code manual for human behavior. Let's get right into it. So, here's a question to kick things off. Why do so many of our big goals and New Year's resolutions completely crash and burn by, say, mid-February? It's a wildly relatable phenomenon, right? We set this massive goal on January 1st, we feel incredibly pumped up, ready to conquer the world, and then a month later, we're literally right back where we started. Well, the source material reveals a pretty harsh truth about this. It's because we're relying entirely on finite willpower. We somehow trick ourselves into thinking we just need to try harder or want it more, but the core premise we're exploring today completely flips that narrative on its head. It isn't your willpower that dictates your success. It's your systems. Okay, let's dive into the absolute foundation of this entire philosophy. It's called the aggregation of marginal gains. Basically, it's the philosophy of searching for a tiny, almost invisible 1% margin of improvement in absolutely everything you do. Clear highlights this amazing story of a British cycling coach, Dave Brailsford, to really hammer this home. Brailsford took a historically average, honestly kind of mediocre cycling team and turned them into Olympic gold medalists simply by obsessing over tiny improvements. They didn't just tell the guys to pedal harder. No, they optimized the literal travel pillows the athletes slept on to make sure they got slightly better rest. They tested out different massage gels. I mean, it sounds insanely meticulous, right? But that relentless, laser-focused dedication to that 1%, it completely changed the sport forever. And here's the mathematical proof of why that relentless dedication works so insanely well. 37. If you get just 1% better at something every single day, by the end of 1 year, you aren't 365% better. No, thanks to the sheer power of compounding, you are 37 times better. Not 37%, 37 times better. But, there's a terrifying flip side to this. If you get 1% worse every day, you just slowly drift down to essentially zero. It's these tiny daily changes that are creating absolutely exponential growth over time. Now, this is where things get really interesting because this shifts the entire paradigm from what you want to achieve to who you want to be. You see, there are layers to behavioral change. Most people work from the outside in. They focus entirely on the outcome. They say things like, I want to run a marathon. And sure, that's great, but it's a temporary destination. The deepest, most powerful layer of change happens when you shift to the system. When you shift your actual identity. You stop saying, I want to run a marathon, and instead you look in the mirror and say, I am a runner. The marathon, that's just an outcome. Being a runner, well, that is a permanent identity. Because ultimately, and this is absolutely crucial to grasp, every single action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. Habits aren't just annoying chores you check off a to-do list. They are literal, repeated proof you're showing yourself about who you actually are. Every single time you execute a habit, like going to the gym, you're casting a very real vote for the identity of someone who works out. But if you skip the gym for a month, you're casting votes against that identity. You literally become your habits. All right, let's move on to the mechanics of this whole thing and see how it builds. If our habits dictate our identity, how in the world do we actually form them? Well, it all comes down to this neurological 4-step habit loop that drives quite literally all human behavior. First up, there is a cue. This is something that triggers your brain, like feeling your phone buzz in your pocket. Second is the craving. You really want that change in state that checking your phone is going to bring. Third is the response. This is the actual physical habit of picking up the phone and unlocking it. And finally, number 4, the reward. That's the little hit of dopamine that basically tells your brain, hey, that felt good, let's remember to do this exactly the same way next time. Which brings us perfectly to this brilliant mapping of the 4 laws of behavior change. To build a good routine, you need to deliberately align with those exact 4 steps we just talked about. So for the cue, make it obvious. Put your running shoes right by the front door where you literally trip over them. For the craving, make it attractive. Maybe only let yourself listen to your absolute favorite podcast while you're running. For the response, make it easy. Choose a gym that is directly on your commute home from work. And for the reward, make it satisfying. Track your progress on a calendar so you feel that immediate visual win. Now the genius part? Look at the bad habits side. You can invert these exact laws and use them as weapons to destroy your bad habits. Want to stop doom scrolling before bed? Okay, make the cue invisible by leaving your phone charging in the kitchen. Make the response difficult by deleting the social media apps off your home screen. You're using the exact same neurological loop, just hacking your brain in the opposite direction.
So you might be wondering, how do we reliably make new habits obvious and easy? Enter the habit stacking formula. It goes like this. After I do my current habit, I will do my new habit. This is such a seamless strategy to piggyback new behaviors right onto routines you've already locked in. You don't just try to find some random new block of time to sit down and write a novel. Instead, you say, after I pour my morning cup of coffee, I will sit down and write for exactly 10 minutes. Pouring the coffee is already a permanent, totally automatic fixture in your day, right? So you're simply attaching a new train car to an engine that is already moving down the tracks.
Now, to make that response even easier, we apply what's known as the 2-minute rule. The rule is simple. If starting a habit takes less than 2 minutes, just do it now. The entire goal here is to drastically, ruthlessly reduce friction. Say you want to start a running habit. Do not aim for 5 miles on day 1. That's a recipe for burnout. Your only goal should be to put on your running shoes and step outside the front door. That takes way less than 2 minutes. And why does this matter so much? Because action follows momentum. Once the shoes are on and you're standing outside, you are infinitely more likely to just go ahead and start running. So, the absolute crucial point here is that context beats character almost every single time. We so often think that success is all about relying on our finite willpower, but honestly, it's really about architecting your environment. The source material highlights this truly fascinating Dutch study. They found that households with fruit bowls simply sitting out on the kitchen counter consistently had healthier diets. It absolutely wasn't because these people had some sort of superhuman willpower. Nope. It was just because the fruit was visible and the junk food was hidden away in a cabinet. You really don't need to magically become a completely different person to succeed. You just need to design your physical spaces to make the right choices the easiest choices. And keep in mind, environment isn't just physical, it's highly social too. Human beings are, at our core, imitation machines. We naturally copy the habits of 3 main groups. First, the close. That's our immediate friends and family. Second, the many, meaning our broader culture and society. And third, the powerful, the role models and leaders we look up to. Your social environment matters just as much as your physical one. If you want to read more books, go join a book club. Joining a community where your desired behavior is just the normal, everyday behavior, that is brilliant strategy, not cheating. Now, what happens when you do all of this, you're putting in the work, and you still don't see results? Well, imagine an ice cube sitting in a really cold room. You slowly start raising the temperature. 25 degrees, 28 degrees, 31 degrees, and absolutely nothing happens. The ice just sits there. You're putting in all this effort, but you feel completely stuck in what Clear calls the valley of disappointment. But then you hit 32 degrees, and suddenly the ice melts. This perfectly illustrates the plateau of latent potential. Your past efforts during those first few weeks, they weren't wasted at all. The energy was simply being stored up. You just hadn't crossed the threshold yet. Okay, so once you finally break through that plateau, how do you actually keep going without burning out or getting bored? You use the Goldilocks rule. Humans experience peak motivation when we're working on tasks right at the edge of our current abilities. Not too hard, not too easy. It keeps you perfectly, intensely engaged. But the source material notes a pretty hard truth here. Eventually, even the most perfectly balanced habits are going to get boring. The ultimate differentiator between an amateur and a true professional is that the professional shows up even when it isn't exciting anymore. They succeed because they literally fall in love with boredom. Which brings us straight to the ultimate mic drop takeaway from James Clear's work. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Goals are great. They tell you where you want to go. But your systems are the vehicle that actually gets you there. Your daily mechanics, those tiny 1% margins, the obvious cues, the habit stacks we talked about. These everyday, unglamorous systems are what absolutely determine your ultimate success. Which leaves us with one final, vital question for you to consider right now. What system are you building today? I want to challenge you to stop relying on that fleeting, unreliable feeling of motivation. Stop waiting for the absolute perfect time to start, because it doesn't exist. Take these concepts, architect your environment, make your desired habits incredibly obvious and easy, and start casting those real votes for the person you want to become. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Take these tools, go build your systems, and I'll see you next time.